Once again, my name is Paul of Ige Adiyanju. Last time I started talking on the subject of prayers. And last time I focused on hidden prayer. And hidden prayer is otherwise, according to me, otherwise known as intercessory prayer. That is when you are praying for someone who may not actually have an idea that you're praying for them. Or someone is praying for you and you have no idea that they're praying for you. So hidden prayer is prayers said for someone else, on behalf of someone else. What we'll be focusing on today is silent prayers, which are prayers that is personal to us. But because of how sensitive the prayers are, because of the nature of the prayer, we make it very inconspicuous. We are quiet about it, and it's silent in its form. And that is the nature of silent prayers. So that will be the focus of my discussion tonight. But before we do that, I want to go ahead and play this intro music, and shortly after that, we'll continue on into the topic for today, which is silent prayer. Let's get into the topic for today. I want to quickly share two stories with you before I proceed with the message. The first story was about a little girl. There was this little girl that was on her knee praying silently. And her mom walked into the room where she was praying. And the mom asked her, "What are you doing?" So the little girl with her eyes closed, answered her mom and said, "I'm praying." Then the mom responded to her and said, "But I can't hear you." So this little girl opened one of her eyes and looked at her mom and said, "I'm praying to God, Mom. I'm not praying to you." This, was a story I heard, and it made me laugh when I heard it, because when you pray, you're praying to God. Whether you're loud as you pray or you're quiet as you pray, God still hears your prayer. God hears your prayer, whether it's loud or whether it's silent. Now, the other story I want to share is a personal story for me. This is quite an interesting story. It's a story about myself. I don't think I've actually shared this with anyone ever. Maybe you, by the time I'm done sharing it, you have an idea the reason why. But anyway, a few years ago, some years back, I was still in my home country, Nigeria, and I was praying to God. I was going through some challenges, and I was planning to come to the United States to further my education. And during that moment, it was very difficult financially, and things were not adding up. And at this point, my family and I were already planted a church in this part of the country. Because we've planted a church in the part of the country, I actually have access to the church. I have access to the church building. So whenever I want to, I could just grab the keys to the church and go there. And I'm a drummer, so I go there, I play the drums and just, do that by myself, play the drum, praise God, and do whatever I need to do. And sometimes I just go there and spend some quiet time by myself. So on this particular occasion, I picked the keys. I walked, to the church building because it was quite close to where we lived. I walked there, went in there, and started praying concerning my situation. And I began to pray, and eventually I realized something. This particular Bible passage that I'm going to be sharing my message on today came to my mind, and I made a decision to do something in that moment. It's going to get a little juicy right here. But anyway, so I stripped myself butt naked, no clothes on me, nothing on me. Of course, again, I was by myself. The door to the church was locked. I was in one of the rooms in the church auditorium. I locked myself up and I stripped myself, butt naked. And I began to pray to God. And the reason why I did that was because I felt like, we have our clothes on many times. We have the makeup. We have everything that make us look, like we are this and that. Like, we feel too good about ourselves sometimes. But in my head, I felt like if everything is stripped away from me, if my coverings, my clothes, my family, my academic achievements, everything that I've ever had and everything that I've ever known, if all these are stripped away from me, all I will be left with is just the way I was, butt naked with nothing that is of value to me. So I went before God just as I am. And I was telling God that this is all that I am, regardless of anything that I might have achieved in life. This is all that I am. And I was saying this to God, that God, I need you to change my story. I need you to change my situation. And at some point, I went flat on my face on the ground. I was lying down, prostrated on the ground. And I prayed for quite some time. I was crying. I was snorting all over the place, sweating all over the place. By the moment I stood up and I stepped away from where I was laying down, you could see the sweat. The sweat has drawn like a silhouette of my body, of my shape, onto the cement, onto the floor. And I stepped back and I looked at that, that sweat. And I told God, this is what I'm using to make this vow and this covenant to you this moment. That as this dries up, I'm making a covenant with you that if you change my story, if you turn my story around, I will serve you for the rest of my life, and I will make my due diligence to honor you in everything that I do. And I stood up from there. I put on my clothes and I head back home. And fast forward a few months, everything that I had prayed for was answered. And I was on my way to the United States to further my education. A lot of things happened within that period that it was only God that could do something like that. But why did I share this story? I'm sharing this story to let you know that there are some prayers that are very intimate. And because of the nature of those prayers, they are silent prayers. Prayers take many forms, but your heart matters when you pray. Now, I will be reading from the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 1. This is the story of Hannah and the story of Samuel's birth. Hannah was married to a man named Elkanah. Elkanah had 2 wives. The other wife had kids, but Hannah was barren. And because of this situation for Hannah, she was in a moment of desperation. She was depressed. She was distressed. And in her anguish, Hannah prayed to God. So let's read from 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 10. So we see what Hannah did. The Bible says in 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 10, and Hannah was in bitterness of soul and prayed to the Lord and wept in anguish. She wept in anguish. And while she was weeping, she made a covenant with God. She made a vow to God that if God would give her a son, that she would give that child back to God. As she was making this prayer, her prayer was silent, but it was fervent. Her prayer was silent, but it was targeted. She had a target for her prayer, and she made a vow to God. Although she was misunderstood by the prophet, by the priest, yet God heard her prayers. And we'll see this in verse 12 and 13. It says, and it happened as she continued praying before the Lord that Eli watched her mouth. That's a priest. Now Hannah spoke in her heart until only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli thought she was drunk. So the priest thought she was drunk. So the priest called her out on that. Hey, why are you coming to this place to pray while you're drunk? Or what exactly are you doing here? Because the priest was confused. Her mouth was moving. She was praying in anguish. She was probably animated in the way she was praying. And her lips was moving, but no words were coming out of her mouth. The priest could not hear. So the priest thought, okay, she must be drunk. But Hannah then revealed to the priest that, okay, I'm actually not drunk. I have a serious need, and I'm just praying to God in my distress, in my anguish, so God can answer me. Upon realizing this, the priest made a prayer for Hannah. Now in verse 17, 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 17, it says, then Eli answered and said, go in peace, and the God of Israel grant your petition which you have asked him. Now Eli blessed Hannah. Eli blessed Hannah and said that, okay, I hear you. Whatever prayer you're asking, whatever request you're making to God, God will grant you that request. Now, unknowingly to Eli, he was also confirming God's answer to Hannah's prayer. The priest was unknowingly confirming God's answer to Hannah's prayer. And her silent cry led to the birth of Samuel. Samuel eventually became a strong priest who anointed kings. Now, here's the irony here. This priest, Eli, who just blessed Hannah, blessed her to confirm the answer to God, the answer of God to Hannah's prayer. And the child that Hannah gave birth to eventually was raised and mentored by Eli, the priest. And this child became a priest and replaced Eli. That's the interesting thing about this. Now, I want you to learn a few things from this story. The first one is this: prayer is not about volume. Prayer is not about volume. It's not about how much noise you can make. You don't have to shout. You don't need to shout for your prayer to be real. Your prayer can be real whether it is quiet or whether it is, loud. And your prayer does not have to necessarily have too many words. It doesn't have to be superfluous. But it has to be sincere, and it has to come from a place of surrender. That's a key to prayer. That's a key to fervent prayer. Now, Jesus called out the religious leaders of his time. Why did Jesus do that? Jesus was calling out the religious leader of his time simply because they were showing off. He called them hypocrites. He said, these people go out in public places and make a lot of noise, and they become so animated and so dramatic. Why? Because they want to publicly show off that they're pious. They wanted to show off that, hey, I'm a great religious person and I can pray. I can speak in tongues. When I pray, mountains shake. But Jesus Christ was telling them that it's not what prayer is all about. Prayer is not for show. Prayer comes from a place of sincerity and surrender. I know today people don't pray loudly anymore, right? People don't pray loudly to show off. But some people pray as if God is deaf. Many people pray as if God is hard of hearing. But they must realize that it doesn't matter whether you pray loudly or quietly. What matters is that you pray with sincerity and you pray with a sense of surrender. When you bring your petitions and requests before God and you ask Him to grant you your request, you should also ask that His will be done. Because ultimately, as our desires are being fulfilled by God, we need to understand that they will be fulfilled according to His will. We can see again Jesus Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane when He was about to face the cross. He was praying to God. He said, if it is possible, if there is any alternative, if there is any other option that I will not drink this cup that is before me, I would love that option. Nevertheless, it is not what I want, but I want your will, God, to be done. Jesus Christ said, if I have the chance, I will take the shortcut. If I have the chance, I will take the easy way out. But it is not my will, but your will that I want to be done. So, the first thing you need to know about silent prayer is that prayer is not about volume. It's about the sincerity of your heart, and it's about you coming before God with a sense of surrender. The second thing is this: your prayer has to come with a target in mind. If your prayer is not targeted, you'll just be shooting blank. If your prayer is not with a target in mind, you'll just be saying random things. Hannah had a target for her prayer. She was barren. She wanted a child, not just a child. She wants a son, and she wants that son so that she can give that son back to God. Mind you, Hannah eventually had the son, Samuel, and she did give the son back to God. And God blessed her with many more children. So you have to pray with a target in mind. Be intentional when you pray. Hannah made a vow. She was precise. Yes, pray without ceasing, according to what the Bible said, but stop seeing prayer as a side thing. You need to take prayer a bit more seriously and give more attention to it. Your prayer is not about volume. It's about sincerity and a sense of surrender. Your prayer has to be with a target. You have to have a target in mind. And the third thing that I want you to learn when it comes to prayer is that faith changes your posture. Faith changes your posture. Now, I'm not talking about your physical posture. I'm talking about your spiritual posture. Now, let's go to 1 Samuel chapter 1 and let's read verse 18. Verse 18 says, and she, Hannah, said, let your maid servant find favor in your sight. So the woman, that is Hannah, went her way and ate, and her face was no longer sad. Her face was no longer sad. Why? Because after she had laid down a petition before God, and after Eli the prophet or the priest has blessed her, she received that by faith and she went away. She received what the prayer of the priest by faith and she went away. And because of that, Her face was no longer sad. She left the temple with peace, even before seeing the answer to her prayer. Faith can change your posture. And I want you to understand that God hears the silent prayers that others may overlook. So, my encouragement for you tonight is that when you think about prayer, so far, I've covered two aspects of prayer. Hidden prayer, which is intercessory prayer, the prayer that you pray for people that do not know you're praying for them, or the prayer that is being prayed for you and you do not know that you are being prayed for. And the second thing, which I've just covered today, is the silent prayers. And these are prayers that are prayed in quietness because of the sensitivity nature, or because of the sensitive nature of the prayers. But these prayers are not about volume. They are about sincerity and a sense of surrender. These prayers are targeted. And when you pray fervently in this way, God answers your prayers. And that's what I want to share to encourage you today. Whenever you pray to God, believe that He is hearing you, and He will answer your prayer according to His will. Well, I want to thank you once again for joining me tonight. I want you to follow me on my TikTok, follow me on YouTube, subscribe. And if you have Rumble, also, you can follow me there. And I welcome your feedbacks, your suggestions, your comments, your questions. If there's any question you have, just send me the questions in the comments, and I will respond to them as soon as I can. Thank you very much once again for joining me on this episode